Greetings, everyone. So this video is on Vijñāna-bhairava-tantra, verse 103. So we're still in this section of the text on contemplative practices. And this section runs up to about verse 110, and then we get more daily life practices. So verse 103 is also a contemplative practice, a beautiful one, and I'll just read it to you. Na cittaṃ nikṣiped duḥkhe, na sukhe va parikṣipet, Bhairavī jñāyatāṃ madhye, tattvam avaśiṣyate. Do not abandon the heart-mind to either suffering or happiness, O Bhairavī. In the center is that reality which remains. Let it be known. Do not abandon the heart-mind to either suffering or happiness, O Bhairavī. In the center is that reality which remains. Let it be known. Okay, so let's break this down. So, citta. Citta I translate heart-mind. And many people are familiar with this translation, but people new to my work will be new to this translation as well. And if you've studied Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, you've heard citta translated constantly as mind. But this translation is not adequate because citta is the locus of both thoughts and emotions, and in Western culture, we don't tend to think that way. Even though, of course, scientists and psychologists understand that thoughts and emotions are very much part of the same fundamental human faculty. Whether you analyze it in neurological terms as the brain or in psychological terms as the psyche. In popular culture, people think of the heart as the locus of emotion and the mind as the locus of thought, and as that they're two separate loci. And our everyday conversation, our everyday languaging, very, very, very frequently reinforces this false dichotomy. So in order to compensate for and sort of antidote this false dichotomy, it's necessary to use a translation that might at first appear to be, a little bit odd or unexpected at least, which is, again, heart-mind. Citta means heart-mind, the locus of both thought and emotion. So it's important that we understand. We can't understand this verse unless we understand that thoughts and emotions are inextricably intertwined. Thoughts give rise to emotions, emotions give rise to thoughts, and it's actually very, very rare, extremely rare in human experience to have a thought unconnected to emotion or emotion unconnected to thought, right? And even those people who seem to have thoughts unconnected to emotions, hyper-rationalists perhaps, it's just the emotional component of their thinking is simply suppressed. It's not absent, right? So this is important to understand that in the verse it says, Na cittaṃ nikṣiped duḥkhe. Do not abandon the mind to sorrow or suffering. The heart mind, sorry. See, I do it myself. Do not abandon the heart mind to sorrow or suffering. nor should the heart-mind be cast into happiness. Now, in the translation, I simply use one verb there. I just say abandon. Do not abandon the heart-mind to either suffering or happiness. But in the original Sanskrit, we have two verbs, which are very, very closely related. They're virtually synonymous, okay? But they are slightly different, right? So we could say, if we want to translate both verbs, do not abandon the mind to sorrow, nor should it be cast into happiness or pleasure, right? But these verbs are very nearly synonyms. There shouldn't be too much made of the difference. It's partially just to fill out the meter. The author needs 16 syllables in the line, right? So that's, it may also be the case that using two verbs is significant. We don't know. We can't ask the original author. But anyway, let's linger just a little bit longer on this sentence, right? Duḥkhe. Duḥkhe means sorrow or suffering or unsatisfactoriness or struggle or difficulty. And it literally means, not literally, etymologically, it means bad space. Ka means space. Duḥkhe, bad space. So we can all understand being in a bad space, right? But the original etymology of this word is actually when you make a chariot, there's an axle hole in the middle of a chariot wheel. So you've got a chariot wheel, and in the middle there's an axle hole that the axle goes through. And if that space is not well made, if it's not smooth, then the axle, of the chariot is going to judder around a lot as you're riding in your chariot. And you're not going to have a good ride, right? It's because you have a duḥkhe, it's going to be a rough ride. And sukhe literally means good space, but originally etymologically refers to that space of the axle hole being being well made, being smooth, and then you have a nice smooth ride, okay? So in the most basic sense of these words, it means, rough ride and smooth ride in the original, but they come to mean, it's very important to acknowledge, the words come to mean a whole range of related things. So duḥkhe certainly also means sorrow and suffering and struggle, and sukhe also certainly means pleasure and happiness of all kinds, but distinct from spiritual joy, ananda, the bliss that has no opposite. Right? So happiness occurs when we're in happy circumstances. Right? It's what the body-mind experiences when circumstances are conducive to its conditioning and to its comfort, right? And unhappiness, duḥkhe, or suffering or unsatisfactoriness, is what the body-mind experiences when conditions are not conducive to its not only to its comfort, but also to how you're mentally conditioned. If you're mentally conditioned to regard certain circumstances as being unsatisfactory, you experience, your body-mind anyway, experiences unsatisfactoriness. Your heart-mind, we could say, right? But body-mind includes heart-mind within it. So the verse is saying, do not abandon the citta, right? And by the way, the citta consists of many subtle subdivisions, like the faculty of attention, the faculty of judgment, the self-image manufacturer. These are all aspects of citta, right? So citta is a complex phenomenon. In that sense, it's psyche. We could translate it as psyche, right? If we understand that includes our emotional self too. So do not abandon the psyche or the heart-mind to sorrow or suffering, but also do not abandon it, do not cast it into pleasure or happiness, because sukhe and duḥkhe, right, in Hindi, sukh and dukh, these are part of an endless cycle called samsara. It's like when you're suffering and your friends say, you'll feel better, just focus on that, you'll feel better soon. But by the same token, when you're feeling good, your friends would be perfectly right to say, don't worry, you'll be suffering soon enough. One gives way to the other. Sukha gives way to dukkha, dukkha gives way to sukha, and that's always the case. That is endlessly the case for this body-mind. So it's very important that you realize that is never going to change. You're never going to somehow land in ongoing happiness. And nobody does, not even the rich and famous. And, in some cases, especially not the rich and famous, right? Right? So when people maximize whatever advantage they think they need, whether it's wealth or recognition or whatever, they don't find ongoing sukha. They don't find that they can just be happy all the time. They don't find they can be pleasurable all the time. It's not possible for the body-mind. So from the perspective of the body-mind, it's perfectly true to say that reality is always going to be more or less exactly like it is now, which is one damn thing after another. Some of it feels good and some of it hurts. One darn thing after another. Some moments are pleasurable, some are painful. That never changes from the perspective of the body-mind. But it's also possible to realize your deeper nature, your essence nature, your innermost self, your Buddha nature. Call it what you will, because no term or phrase could possibly even come close to capturing it. So in that sense, it doesn't matter what you call it. And of course, it's not an it. That's, it's not pin downable in any sense, right? But the point here is, there is a profound paradigm shift that's possible, a shift of identity, if you will, and a shift of your default state from being localized in the body-mind to being localized in essence nature. And that's a figure of speech, right? It's not localizable, but it's that your sense of what you are shifts from body-mind, endlessly problematic body-mind that needs constant maintenance and constantly cycles through moments of pleasure and pain, to essence nature, being itself, that in you which is unborn and undying, the foundation of your being, that which makes all experience possible but is not defined by any experience. Okay, that's what we mean by, in this verse, the center, madhye, the center, right? The center is ironically everywhere. So again, it's a figure of speech. We discover the center that's everywhere by looking within, deeper than thoughts and emotions, as deeply as we can. And when we find the center, only then do we recognize the center is everywhere, right? So, in other words, the fact that body-mind endlessly cycles through moments of pleasure and pain, and that there will always be more pain and there will always be more pleasure, there will always be more sorrow and there will always be more happiness, this ceases to be a problem when your fundamental reference point is in essence nature. And that is a paradigm shift. So, the verse, in the verse, remember, this is a tantric scripture, so this is, God talking, right? Every tantric scripture is spoken by one form or another of the divine, right? And here it's Bhairava, and he's speaking to his other half. We could say, literally, his other half, right? Only figuratively, his consort, It's consciousness and energy in dialogue, one might say. But Bhairavī is a name of the goddess. But it also, so there's this double meaning here, because the listener is suddenly being addressed as the goddess, because the listener to the scripture has forgotten by now the frame story or the context, because it's not been mentioned in many, 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 many verses, right? And then suddenly you hear, "O Bhairavī." And so hopefully there's a moment where your mind doesn't remember the frame story and you're simply hearing yourself addressed as the goddess. Do not abandon the heart-mind to either sorrow or happiness, O Bhairavī. In the center is that reality which remains. let it be known. Right? This very verse was echoed, probably unintentionally, but maybe intentionally, echoed centuries later by Ramana Maharshi in the mid-20th century, when he said, thoughts come and go, feelings and emotions come and go, memories come and go, aspirations, ideas come and go, worries and anxieties come and go. Find out what remains. And that was Ramana's instruction in a nutshell. Of course, he also gave this whole teaching around who am I, what am I. But his instruction in a nutshell was that, really. All this comes and goes. Find out what remains. We're the same language here. There is a reality which ever remains. It's not seeable, hearable, touchable, tasteable, smellable, or thinkable, but it's the power by which all of that occurs, the power by which seeing, hearing, and thinking occurs. But it itself is the source of all that, and not, therefore it's not objectifiable, right? As Alan Watts always used to love to say, just like you can't see your own eyes or bite your own teeth, that which you are is not perceivable as an object. It's the power by which all perceiving occurs. And yet it can be known, not known as an object, not known as conceptually. We have this word jñāyatāṃ. It is worthy to be known, and it is possible to be known, right? We don't have a form in English that mimics exactly the Sanskrit form, right? It can be known, and it's worthy of being known. This reality. Let it be known is the simple translation, but it's deeper than that, right? That reality which always remains as everything else comes and goes. To know it is to be it, is to abide in it. And when you abide in it, you joyfully allow the coming and going of all that comes and goes. You let what comes, come. You let what goes, go. And not only that, you're happy to do so. In fact, you love, it's not a neutral state. You love to allow the coming of all that comes and the going of all that goes. When you are abiding in your essence nature, and we could say that's how you know. That's how you know you're abiding in your essence nature. Perfectly happy to allow the coming of all that comes and the going of all that goes. And that is a peace that passeth all understanding. And when you embrace that, when you abide in that, it doesn't mean that you won't have many moments of happiness and sorrow. It means they exist and occur in a different context, you know. So you don't need to be afraid of becoming neutral or anything like that. We do the body-mind tends to mellow out as it gets older. It just tends to mellow out a bit, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's this beautiful centeredness in which drama or lack of drama, both are part of the beauty of existence that's coming and going. You don't get involved in the drama, but you also don't hate it anymore. You also don't think, oh, it's drama, you know. You don't love it or hate it, right? Because the heart mind is not abandoned to sorrow or happiness. Okay, so that's verse 103. Vijñāna-bhairava-tantra. Let's just hear it one more time. Can't hear it too many times, this one. Na cittaṃ nikṣiped duḥkhe, na sukhe va parikṣipet. Bhairavī jñāyatāṃ madhye, kiṃ tattvam avaśiṣyate. Om. May that sacred center be known. May you abide in that sacred center. Iti Shiva.